Now that you've seen how to create lines using the pencil tool, some of you might be wondering, how do you go about actually modifying those lines once you've drawn them? It's one thing to create them, but after you've created those lines, how can you change them? Well, there's a few different ways to go about doing that here in Flash MX 2004. The easiest way, in my opinion, is to first make sure you have the arrow tool selected, and then select a line. Now, lines in Flash MX 2004 aren't what they seem. Usually they're comprised of many parts, and those parts are split up usually where the line makes a sharp angle or takes a turn or anything like that. So if you click once on a line, sometimes it will select all of the line as it does here, or in other lines, if you click on it once, it'll only select pieces of the line. Of course, it's not going to cooperate in this example, but here you go. There's one where it selects just a portion of the line, but not the actual entire line. Again, when you're selecting objects in Flash, you can tell what's selected because in this case, it looks a little bit thicker. And if you look really closely, you can see that there's a bunch of little white dots. As you'll see when you're selecting larger shapes, especially when they're filled with solid colors like an oval, you'll see clearly that those little white dots fill the entire shape that you have selected. So that's a couple different ways to tell that you have something selected inside of Flash. So when you're going to select something, in this case like this line, if you just single click on it, it's only going to select a portion of that line sometimes. It depends on the actual line itself. To select the entire line, the entire shape, double click on it. In that case, it will select the entire line. Once you have it selected, down here in your Properties panel, you can then change different settings about that line. For instance, if you wanted to change the color to red, from the Swatch Color Picker, which is the little color picker next to the pencil icon here in your Properties window, and again, as I mentioned previously, it's also up here in the Colors section of your toolbox, you can click on that color swatch and choose any other color you'd like. In this case, I'm just going to choose this red swatch. My line that I have selected, as soon as I change that color red, it will also update to have that same property. If I want to change the size of my line, I can just click and drag on my size slider here to change the height of the line. In this case, I'll switch it to 5.5. You can also just select the text inside that field and type in a new number. You can then hit return or enter on your keyboard, and Flash will then change that line. You can also change the style of the line by clicking on this pull-down menu, and you can change the style to anything you'd like. In this case, I'll change it to a dashed line. So that's one way to actually modify a line after you've drawn it. And again, this line, which is also called a stroke, can also be changed on strokes or lines that surround a object, as you'll see when we get into the oval and rectangle tool. So it doesn't just apply to a line that you've drawn with the pencil tool, it also applies to lines or strokes that you've drawn with the line tool, and even lines or strokes around the outsides of shapes. You can just select it and change it down here in your Properties panel. Let me deselect that shape by clicking with my arrow tool out here on the stage where there's nothing else around. That will deselect the shape that I had selected. And I'm going to show you the other way to actually change and modify a stroke. You can do that with what's called the ink bottle tool. And the ink bottle tool is right up here above this eyedropper, and it looks like a little ink bottle. Go ahead and click on that once to select it, and you'll see down here in your Properties window different settings relating to the stroke. And right now they have the same settings that we just modified. So if I want to change one of my lines to have a blue color, down here in my Properties panel, after I've selected the ink bottle tool, I'm going to click on this color swatch to change my stroke color. I'm going to select a blue color. I'm going to set the stroke height to be, say for instance, 3 in this example. And I'm going to change my stroke style to instead be a dotted line. And then if you move your mouse onto the stage, you'll see you get a little ink bottle icon. You can see that there. And I'm going to click on one of my lines. I'm going to click on this line up here at the top right. As soon as I click on it with a little ink, as you can see, the line changes its color and its style and its size to match whatever I specified down here in the Properties window. So those are the two different ways of actually going back and modifying a stroke after you've drawn it. In this case, as in the previous example, I've drawn a couple lines. And then one way is to select a line with your arrow tool and modify its properties down here in the Properties panel. The other way is with the ink bottle tool. You first select the ink bottle tool, specify your settings here in the Properties window, and then just click on whatever stroke you want to modify.